Hey guys, so today I'm gonna talk about the fastest and easiest way to immigrate here in Canada, and that is the International Student Pathway. So basically what it is that you have to study here for at least 1 year in a publicly funded university or college, and then you also have to take a program that will lead you to a white-collar job. After graduation, you'll get your postgraduate work permit, and once you have that, then you can start applying for jobs. And once you've secured the job that's at least 1 year or a permanent job, then you can start the process of applying for permanent residence here in Canada and eventually become a citizen. So the entire process took me only about 3 months. In August 2019, my sister broached the subject to me about applying for a student visa so I can immigrate to Canada, and I was hesitant a bit, but I went through the process anyway, and I took the IELTS exam in September, and then that same month after I got the result of my IELTS, I applied for the software developer program at MIT, where I currently am studying. And then a month after, in October, I received my letter of acceptance from MIT. That's after I took the assessment test, which is basically the entrance test. And then once I got the spot at MIT in October, I applied for the visa online through the CIC website. And then about 24 days after I lodged my application online, I received my visa. And then a month after, in December, I flew to Canada, and now I'm here. So what's the most important thing to consider before applying for a student visa here in Canada? Well, it's, as you expected, it's money. It's not cheap here, but compared to other countries like Australia or US, it's much cheaper here, but still it's not cheap because they charge the international students here at least twice what they would charge local students. So the tuition for 1 year, at least where I'm studying, is $17,000 for 1 year. And then my homestay, which is this room plus food, so that's $10,000 for 1 year. Transpo, I bought a 1-year bus pass, that's about $1,000, and for the mobile phone, you'll spend about $500 in 1 year. Clothes, you'll need to buy winter clothes, boots, parkas, thermal underwear. That can be, to be conservative, that's about $1,500. And the plane ticket coming here, if you're coming from the Philippines, it would be at least $1,000. And miscellaneous stuff like, of course, entertainment. You want to see a movie, have coffee here, some projects in school, that could be around $2,000. So in total, you need at least $33,000 to come here. 33,000 Canadian dollars is about maybe 1.1 or 1.2 million pesos. It's a lot of money, but if you think about it, that's the cost of a brand new sedan, a brand new car. And at some point in your life, you're gonna buy a car, right? So just think about it as buying a car. It's a good investment. You have to take the IELTS exam, which is a requirement for most schools here in Canada. If you're going into an undergraduate program like a diploma program or a bachelor's degree, then you have to score at least a 6. But if you're going for master's or PhD, then you have to score at least a 7 in IELTS. So this is another expense because the IELTS test costs about $300. And if you're not yet comfortable speaking English, then you have to take review classes to prepare you for the test, which could be anywhere between $100 to $200. not all schools require IELTS, but I encourage you to take the IELTS because it will give you more options in which school to apply to, and also which province, because for most schools, again, they will require an IELTS. At least here in Winnipeg, all the schools require IELTS. There are some that do not require IELTS, like there's a few in Ontario and also in Calgary that do not require IELTS, but again, it will limit your choices, so take the IELTS. The next thing to consider is where you want to study, which province and which city. You may have family in Vancouver or Toronto, that's why you may want to study there, so it will be cheaper for you if they can provide free accommodation, if they have an extra room, or free food, free transportation, if they can drive you to school every day. So, and also emotional support. Not everyone can endure being alone in a foreign land, so that's a big thing. And also the weather. Some cities are warmer than most cities here in Canada. For example, here in Winnipeg, the temperature can drop to minus 50 degrees Celsius occasionally, which is very cold, and we do not have school on those days. But in some provinces, for example in Vancouver, their winter is typically about 6 degrees Celsius, so it's like spring weather. So, and also the cost of living, it's much more expensive in bigger cities like Toronto and Vancouver. The rent is twice more expensive. Also, the tuition is at least 20 to 30% more expensive. But the deciding factor for me why I chose Winnipeg, Manitoba is the pathways for immigration, because each province has different pathways for immigration. In most provinces, you have to study for at least 2 years and get a job offer and work for at least 1 year before you can start applying for permanent residence. So that could take you up to 3 years before you can apply for PR. But in some provinces, you only need to study for 1 year. Like here in Manitoba and also in Alberta, the requirement for provincial nominee program is only 1 year of studies. Here in Manitoba, you have to just study for 1 year, and then after 1 year you get your postgraduate work permit and start applying for a job. And once you have a job offer of a contract of at least 1 year or a permanent job, then you can immediately start applying for permanent residence in their provincial nominee program. And they also prioritize international students who graduated here. So that's why I chose Winnipeg over Vancouver, where I have family who can support me. Also, it's much cheaper, of course, if you just study for 1 year. So for example, here in Manitoba, the requirement is to study for 1 year. But in PEI or New Brunswick, the cost of living is cheaper and the tuition is also much cheaper, but you have to study for 2 years. So if you add the 2 years, that's more than what the extra that I would pay to study here in Winnipeg for 1 year. So it made much more sense for me to study here in Winnipeg, although I came here without knowing anybody. Next, you have to pick the school and what program you want to study. You have to make sure that the school that you pick is a publicly funded school, and that the program you pick qualifies for postgraduate work permit or PGWP, because not all programs are qualified for PGWP. Typically, it's the programs in publicly funded schools that will lead you towards a white-collar job, like you have to study nursing or business or IT or accounting, things that can lead you to a white-collar job. The application fee for most schools are typically between $150 to $200, and then some schools will require you to take an assessment test, like an entrance exam, that can cost you about, at least mine, it cost me about $150 because I had to pay for the invigilator that would facilitate the exam for me in the Philippines. I tapped British Council for that, and that's how much they charge. So if the school that you chose requires an assessment test, then you just contact British Council, and then they can facilitate that assessment test or entrance exam for you. So there's also the choice between a 1-year or a 2-year program. That would mostly depend on which province you choose to study at, because if you are going to study in Alberta or here in Manitoba, the requirement to qualify for provincial nominee is only 1 year. You just have to study for 1 year, and then after you graduate, then you get your postgraduate work permit, so you can start applying for a job. And once you secure the job that gives you at least a 12-month contract or longer or permanent, then you can start applying for permanent residence as soon as you get your job offer. In other provinces, if you choose to study in BC, for example, then you can't take just a 1-year program. You have to take a 2-year program. So once you have been accepted to a program in a school, then you can start applying for the student permit. I'd highly discourage you to get help from an agency to get the student visa, because it's actually very easy to get the visa. You just have to go to the Canadian immigration website, which is cic.gc.ca. Again, that's cic.gc.ca, and that's where you upload all of your documents. So depending on the type of your application, if you're a single person applying for a student visa, or if you have a family and you want to take them all to Canada with you, then that's different. But I'm only going to talk about my experience in applying here as a single applicant. So the documents that I sent them were the letter of acceptance from school, and the letter from the school that proves that my program includes practicum. So I also need a work permit and the passport, of course, and my paid tuition. When I applied for the visa, I actually only paid for half of the tuition, half of the 1-year tuition cost, but I highly encourage you to pay for at least 1 year. And then I also submitted my certificate of employment and 6 months bank statement. Some people, or most people, would open a GIC account, which is like a time deposit account here in Canada. That increases your chances to getting approval. But I didn't have time to do that, so I didn't. But if you're not getting GIC, just make sure that you have enough money in your bank account that will show them that you can pay for 1 year tuition and 1 year cost of living, which is at least $10,000 Canadian. I also had to submit my police clearance. That's for those of you in the Philippines, that's NBI clearance. So also, the most important thing they say is the SOP letter. That's the statement of purpose, where you explain why you will be studying in Canada and why you've chosen Canada and why that school and why that program. You have to be able to prove basically that you're going back to the Philippines or whichever country you're from to get approved. But I actually didn't have to do that. In my SOP, I was very honest. I told them that after graduation, I'd get my postgraduate work permit and then apply for a permanent residence. But I still got approved. So I don't think it's true that you have to lie in your application that you plan to go back to your country after studying here, but it all depends on how you defend that in your letter. The last step in the online application is for you to pay the application fee, which is 150 Canadian dollars. That was in October 2019 when I applied. It could have increased by now. I paid by a credit card, and then after that you can click on submit. So 2 days after I submitted my application, I received an email notification requesting for a medical exam. So the day after I received that notification, I went to the accredited hospital. There's 2 in the Philippines. I went to the one in BGC in St. Luke's Medical, and that's where I had my medical exam. I paid about 11,000 pesos for the medical exam. And then a few days after I completed that medical exam, I received another notification saying that I passed the medical. And then a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks after that, I got my result. It was a notification requesting for my passport. So that's when you know that you have been approved, when you get the passport request. So that was it. After I got my visa stamp, my passport stamp, I booked a flight and arrived here in Canada on the 23rd of December 2019. So it was very quick. So I hope you guys learned a lot about how to apply for a Canadian student visa. And if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. I'll try to reply to all of your questions. Thank you.